Hi everyone, this isn't going to be my usual type of video because it's late August. I've been really overworked this month and I know I couldn't get a video out to you last week because we had a power cut. So this week I don't have time to do a highly edited and highly polished thing, but what I thought instead might be quite interesting is I'll just take you through some of the books that I've bought recently and tell you a little bit about them, why I like them and why I bought them, and hopefully that will be of some interest to you, even though it's not super YouTube algorithmy as a video. So we can just run through them now. This is a lovely book, one I'm always on the lookout for. This is Beren and Luthien. Beren and Luthien is the sort of foundational love story of Middle-earth. If you go and visit Tolkien's grave just down the road from me in Oxford, he shares a headstone with his wife Edith, and you will see the names Beren and Luthien inscribed on that grave. And that's because, you know, a little over 100 years ago in 1917, while Tolkien was home from the Western Front and recuperating after the Battle of the Somme, him and his wife Edith found a woodland glade, and you can see that woodland glade illustrated on the back cover here. And there they sat in this sort of fog of cow parsley, and she danced for him, and they had only been married a couple of months and were falling deeper and deeper in love. And the love story of Beren and Luthien, the love story between a mortal and an immortal, became one of the sort of early foundational stories of Middle-earth. This is a first edition of the book from 2017. It's signed by Alan Lee. I think you could theoretically have a copy signed by Christopher Tolkien, and though I'm not sure I've seen many of those over the years. Here we have that colour plate of the woodland glade, really rather beautiful. And it's a really touching and beautiful thing. So lovely for Tolkien fans. I have two other sort of early Middle-earth works here, both in really rather nice condition. We've got the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales, both first editions. The Silmarillion is, of course, yes, 1977. You can tell I'm tired if I'm having to remember the publication dates of books I know so well. But yeah, both in lovely condition. The Silmarillion is easier to get in nice condition, I would say, than Unfinished Tales, because this blue on Unfinished Tales often fades to the spine. You can see there's a bit of fading here, if I go like that, but it's not too bad. So, I mean, the Silmarillion, you may know. Unfinished Tales collects tales from, I think, the three... let me just go to the introduction. Yeah, so from the three ages of Middle-earth. So you have the first age. Most of that is what sort of material that appears in the Children of Húrin. You then have the second age with Númenor and Galadriel and Celeborn, and then and I actually haven't looked through this in a while. You have parts from the third age. So that's the period that we know in the Lord of the Rings, and we have the Hunt for the Ring here. You can see at the bottom. So really interesting little snippets and tidbits of Middle-earth, and they're really sort of essential supplements. If you have a sort of nice set of the history of the Middle-earth, and then you have these two books, they're the kind of, I guess, main works giving you, or the main primary sources giving you that history of Middle-earth. This is really rather lovely, a little bit different, but this is the first edition of Cider with Rosie by Laurie Lee, that wonderful memoir of the Cotswolds. If you haven't read it, I'd really recommend it. It's so beautifully written. We can see the title page here. And the reason that I bought this, I mean, the first edition of this book is a nice and sought after book, but this copy is also signed by Laurie Lee, which is really rather wonderful. And it's got this great, let me just carefully open it up, John Ward wraparound dust jacket design. So that's really rather sweet, isn't it? We then have these books here all arrived today. I'll show you the first ones here. This is a beautiful set of, excuse me, trying to move them around to show you on the camera, but a beautiful set of Napoleonic histories. I'm going to set them down and just show you one binding at a time. But you can see here it's really beautifully done. Very French in style, with these lovely thick raised bands, a very slim title label at the head and foot of the spine, and then this eagle here, which it seems Napoleonic to me, but to be honest I don't know off the top of my head. This was a work originally published I think around 1910, yeah, 1912, and it's got its original wrappers bound in. So this would have been issued in 1912 as a paperback, and then someone's bought the paperbacks and bound them in this beautiful, beautiful uniform binding. So that's a really wonderful thing. Variations on a theme here. We have a lovely set of Virgil's works in a wonderful navy Morocco binding. This is actually something that might be worth showing you just to distinguish. So this is what we would call a quarter leather binding, because around the spine we have leather and the rest is board. And this is what we call a half leather binding, because you can see we've got the spine and the corners in leather over board. So if I hold them up next to each other, you can see the difference there between quarter leather and half leather. This is really a rather sweet set of Virgil. It's what, early? Yeah, 1821. This is published in London, but with the text obviously in Latin. And yeah, a really beautiful set. I can show you a bit inside if you like. Where's our title page? There we are. So yes, that's really rather nice and quite varied. So I'll pop those and our Napoleonic books back on the shelf. These next ones are an absolute knockout, and they even come in their own case. But yeah, just look how beautifully pristine these are. This is a set of Molier in French, in the most immaculate Morocco bindings, and housed in this, as you can see, original sort of marbled slipcase. And again, let me take out the first volume so that I can show it to you. We've got another quarter leather binding here, really stylish. If you look at the colouring there, the lovely deep red of the beautifully preserved leather reflected in this marbling here. And this is a set of Molier's works. I think it's 19th century, but I don't think it's dated. So off the top of my head, I'm not sure of the date. But yeah, a really rather beautiful thing. Gilt top edges, untrimmed page edges, as you can see there. And I'll just show you the title page inside. Yeah, really absolutely stunning and total knockouts. We've got a few more things. We'll keep going along this shelf. It's sort of extending into the distance here. This is a book that is always in demand. I've got lots of people on sort of waiting lists for it. But it's a modern book. I was going to say the most modern I've shown you, but I've shown you a book from 2017, so that's obviously not the case. But this is the first edition of Maurice. I always call it Maurice, but some people say it's Maurice. And in the film adaptation, the Merchant Ivory film with Hugh Grant in it, they say Maurice, so maybe I've got that wrong. But anyway, who cares about pronunciation? This is the first edition from 1971. Forster died in 1970. It was never published in his lifetime because it's a novel of homosexual love. Written in 1913 to 1914, obviously homosexuality was illegal then, so back then he just circulated it in typescript under sort of sworn secrecy to a few fellow members of the Bloomsbury group who read it and gave bits and pieces of feedback. But yeah, then over 60 years later, it was published after his death. I mean, Forster is a fascinating figure because in the year 1904, he hadn't published any novels, right? In 1905, he publishes Where Angels Fear to Tread. Over the next 5 years, he publishes 4 absolutely astonishingly good novels. He publishes Where Angels Fear to Tread, The Longest Journey, A Room with a View, and in 1910, Howard's End, which is like his most successful book. But then he just can't write. I mean, he's literally paralysed, seemingly paralysed by the success of Howard's End. And he starts a few different projects in the years afterwards and feels like he's just rewriting Howard's End over and over again. He started a project called Arctic Summer, and that was no good. So he went off to India to see a friend in India, a university friend. And while he was in India, he came up with the idea to write what would become A Passage to India, but didn't really get very far with the project. He only wrote a few chapters, and that book wouldn't be published until 1924. But then in 1913, he's visiting Edward Carpenter, this sort of yogi-ish mystic prophet of homosexuality in many ways in the Edwardian period. And while he's there, he's touched by a man, and he feels this incredible sensation run through him. And immediately this novel starts to form, and he starts writing it. And finally he can write and finish a novel. When you look inside Maurice, you'll see that on the first page, opposite the title page, it just says, begun 1913, finished 1914, dedicated to a happier year. And I wonder whether, I mean, he knew when he was writing this book that because it dealt with homosexuality, because it has 3 gay main characters, and especially because two of those characters get a happy ending, he knew it couldn't be published. And I wonder whether knowing it was unpublishable made him be able to write it, because he started all these projects after Howard's End and couldn't finish them, and then suddenly managed to do it. It could be because he felt he was sort of unshackled. I mean, people do write about Howard's End that there's this sort of unspoken, like, emotional distance because of Forster's own homosexuality. I don't know about that, but certainly Maurice just comes out of him, and he writes it in a little over a year. So, I mean, fascinating piece of literary history. Although the book is modern, the story, of course, is older. So I always love when I can get my hands on a copy of that. This is very different. This is a first edition of The Secret Garden, Francis Hodgson Burnett, published by Heinemann here in the UK in 1911. I quite like this. Whoever owned this originally tipped in this little thing here with a drawing of a horse on the back. But yeah, we've got our end papers here, and then we go in, of course, colour illustrations by Charles Robinson throughout the book. There's our title page. This isn't the greatest copy in the world. It's actually, I mean, it's really quite worn. So if you're looking for a pristine copy or a copy of this book in very nice condition, this really isn't for you, and I wouldn't recommend buying it. But if you're after a first edition of The Secret Garden and don't mind so much about it being, it being super pristine, then this is sort of a decent enough, honest copy. But yeah, I mean, such an influential and foundational book to so many people. And Charles Robinson has these amazing colour plates throughout the book. I'll show you one more, if I can find one quickly. Yes, there's another one of Charles Robinson's illustrations. But yeah, no, that's a really lovely thing. And I'll just finish this short video. Sorry it's a bit rambled and rushed and so on, but unfortunately time dictates. And I did want to get something out to you this week. Next week we'll have something, hopefully a bit better. I'm filming it tomorrow, in fact. So Anyway, the last book, this is beautiful. It even has its own box, which has a bit of theatre to it for you. But I'm actually so excited to see how this comes across on camera, because it's absolutely beautiful. Let me just slowly open it up, and we have the most stunning binding in here. I'll take it out of the box now and show you. So where you have these boxes with little ribbons in it, what the ribbon is for is if you just pull the ribbon, it will lift the binding up ever so slightly and mean that you can take it out without worrying about damaging it. But I mean, this is a book I bought for the binding. We've got these 4 really quite large tooled roses on the covers. Inside this central panel, we have small pointelles and small leaves. And then all around the outside here, we have these stars in the borders, as well as more little pointelle dots. And then in each of the 4 corners, we have lovely navy hearts. And this is a design that's repeated across both covers, as we can see. I mean, really beautiful. The book itself is a collection of Wordsworth's poetry, published in 1903, and the binding is done by Ramage. We've got lovely silk doublures here, and more of those patterns repeated on our turn-ins. And I'll show you the binder's mark. You can see here, it might be a bit hazy, but you can see it says Ramage. But I mean, just how lovely is that? People often ask me about regretting selling books, and I have to confess, I almost never do. But where you have things quite as beautiful as this, there's often a pang that you don't get to turn around and see it on the shelf and look at it any longer. But there's a joy there too, that someone else gets to experience that. So that's my shelf of books. I mean, literally all these arrived yesterday and today. But yeah, thanks for watching the video. Sorry it's a bit rushed and a bit rambled. Hopefully we'll be back to normal scheduling next week. It's tough. It's a lot of work trying to run this business and YouTube channel and make the content and do the work and all this stuff. But you know, let's be honest, that's my problem. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm on holiday next week, but there'll be a video out next Sunday of my book hunting adventures while I'm there. So see you then.